400 people died on the third planet of System L370. There were no half-empty cups of coffee left on the USS Constellation, and Scotty just earned his pay for the week. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton and Walter Koenig.
Hi.
Hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Original Series, Season 2, Episode 5, The Doomsday Machine, written by Norman Spinrad, directed by Mark Daniels. This was October 20th, 1967. Where were you? How you guys doing today?
I'm doing great.
All right. So first things first, everybody at home, on our first recording, our first attempt, I mispronounced, let's say, the writer's name. Walter, and Walter corrected me, of course. Do you remember Norman Spinrad?
I do.
What was he like?
He was. Well, I found him to be kind of moody and not very gregarious, but nothing offensive. It's just that he seemed to be kind of deep into his own head. He was a friend of Harlan Ellison, who wrote City on the Edge of Forever. So they hung out together a little bit, and as a consequence of their bonding, I got to know Norman a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He's quite talented.
Cool. So this was, Sirach, definitely your first time ever seeing this episode. Walter, was this also your first time seeing this episode?
As a matter of fact, yes, it is. It is.
Three for three. None of us have seen this episode before. I've heard a lot about it, and I know what the Doomsday Machine was about, and I know about Commodore Decker, and I know about the giant spliff flying through the sky.
Is that what that was? Okay.
Yeah, as a giant spliff. But I'd love to just hear your thoughts. I mean, Walter, you tried to sneak in your thoughts at first the other night. What do you think of it overall?
Well, I thought it was quite good. I thought it was an episode that could have existed outside of Star Trek. It wasn't. You didn't need the future to tell the story. It's just a well-constructed, tightly written story that held my interest from start to finish. I was very, very pleased. A couple of things bothered me. One of the things that bothered me was that Nichelle wasn't in it. This was a little bit more substantial role than she frequently had. It was the communications officer. And I suspect the reason was economical. You know, my belief is that Nichelle was under contract in the second season, as was George. I wasn't, which meant that if they worked a day or they worked a week, they got a week's salary. So if they wanted to be economical, if they wanted to be frugal, and it was a day's work, then they would hire another actor to fill in so they could just pay them a day as opposed to paying them a week. The young lady who was a communications officer in this episode did a good job. She's certainly competent, but I felt badly because this would have been an episode that Nichelle could have shined a little bit, and she wasn't there. So that bothered me. And I mean, it didn't ruin my interest in the story, but I felt, too bad she wasn't there.
Yeah, I didn't see you either. That was another kind of too bad for me as well. Because I just feel like, of course, in hindsight, it's easy to say this now, but when you're dealing with budget issues that they were dealing with at the time, they have to make those kinds of choices. But I feel like, as far as consistency is concerned, and you have a television show where I'm watching a ship full of people, I expect to see everybody who's on that ship. Like, where did you go? We're floating around in space. So it bothers me when I don't see somebody. And it's not acknowledged that they're gone for X reason or Y reason. Then that makes sense to me. If they say, hey, Uhura's not here because she's off with her family. Her mother passed away. Something that makes you say, okay. It makes me as the audience kind of say, okay, that makes sense. So she was not here for this episode. So I agree with you in that sense. As far as consistency is concerned, I want to see the crew. I want to see you. I want to see Chekhov. I want to see Uhura. Um, and I did like that they did give me some Scotty in this. We got actually a lot of Scotty in this.
Yeah.
And this guest actor also to me really shined in this episode as well. I thought it was a very, very good job casting.
Yeah, yeah. I think he received some commendation regarding his performance. William Wyndham. I don't know what he won an award of some kind, or was at least acknowledged for having done in an official way. He was acknowledged for having done such a good job.
Before we get into him too much, because I want to talk about him too. But Walter, do you remember why you were also not in this episode? I know it was a while back, but do you remember if it was financial? Do you know if you were working in a theater play or something?
I was on a show-by-show basis. I wasn't under contract that first season. It's the second season of the show. Mm-hmm. So I didn't expect to be in every episode. I knew that was a possibility. So I don't think it bothered me, other than the fact that, it was one opportunity that I didn't get to have. And I'm embarrassed to say that I did not watch a lot of the episodes that I wasn't in. So that's the reason why I was watching it for the first time. And I found it really absorbing. I thought it was a great deal of tension. There's terrific conflict. The Spock conflict with William Wyndham was really good. I think Leonard did a terrific job in holding it in. But you knew that he wasn't pleased with having to obey this guy, because he was a superior rank. And I think the whole thing with Kirk having to get off that ship before it exploded, that was done masterfully, because it wasn't overwrought. He was the captain in control, and it was the seconds were ticking down, and you knew he had to get off that ship. And the thing that was so interesting, the way they did it, is they got 5, for the audience who haven't seen the show. Kirk is on a ship that's on a path to be destroyed, and he has to get off, and the transporter isn't working properly. So they're counting down 5, 4, 3. And then they cut away from him as he's waiting to be, and he still hasn't been transported. And they show the ship exploding, and you don't know if he got off or not.
That's perfect delivery.
Which is really terrifically well done. And then you discovered that, yes, he did. He got off. He got off the ship. So, yeah, I thought from start to finish, there was a lot of tension, a lot of very personal human conflict between Spock and William Wyndham. Just a well developed, well structured story from beginning to end.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think that one thing I enjoyed was the pace. The pace felt right for me. There was the breaks were well timed. Where they would do their commercial breaks, they were well timed. I never felt like I was looking at it like, come on, hurry up and get along with the story. The story kept unfolding in front of you with, first what's going on here, then, oh, there's some life sign, we found a survivor, to that survivor being, integrated into the Enterprise crew. So yeah, I thought all of the stories were great. I love seeing the Constellation and the Enterprise both at the same time. I thought those were great, how they used the shuttlecraft as a diversion and learned information from it. The whole way it unfolded to me felt it felt like it kept the suspense It kept the drama going as the episode went along, and also the music to me stood out. I don't know what
Mhm.
you thought about that, but the music was just, it kept the tempo, it kept me on cue emotionally. So as I was watching, I kept, it was on pace with how I was feeling the music cues as well.
I made
You
a
know,
I made a note about that.
mhm.
So yes, I'm in accord. Music was well deployed as Decker gives as Decker goes to his death.
Mm.
Yeah, I thought as the music was particularly well used in that scene.
Leave it to Walter Koenig, everybody, in a conversation about music to say, I'm in accord. That's pretty
Yeah.
good. Okay. But a bit more about what you were saying earlier, Walter, about how this didn't have to be a sci-fi story. Totally agree
Yeah,
with that. It could have been a police academy story. It could have been a fire marshal story. It could have been an army story. It could have been a navy, on a boat. It's really just about a surviving captain or leader that kind of has his got to get his white whale kind of thing. He's got to get his revenge, and he's got some mental illness, where he's just obsessed with this thing. And now he takes charge of the group that saves him and tries to take them to their death. They say no, they mutiny or whatever it is. And he is still, committed to killing himself if he has to, and he's just gone mad. It could fit in different eras, different genres. It's a great point. I hadn't thought of that.
you know
Yeah,
what it
I was.
reminds me? It makes me think. This is totally beside the point. Okay, but it makes me think Star Trek Next Generation's the first movie.
First Contact, so
Yeah,
good.
well, except the way they wrote off Captain Kirk was, I think, just unforgivable. He should have he should have died trying to save the ship or
Okay,
something of
so
that.
sorry, that was Generations. Then I misspoke. The one where you've got both of your crews together, correct?
Yeah, where he dies on a bridge or something and he falls down and he's dead.
Yeah.
That's they should have, if they're going to kill off somebody as important as Captain Kirk, then it should be heroic. Now,
Mhm.
William Wyndham is, his mind is going and he's in bad shape, but at least you understand why he's doing this, and you can feel for him. He has an extraordinary sense of guilt, and because his crew was all killed. Now, I really think it wouldn't have taken that much. And I know we're going way beyond the point, and I'll retrieve the discussion in a moment. I just wanted to finish this point that Kirk should have had a heroic ending. Should have, if he was going to die, he should have died trying to save the ship or something of that nature.
Some kind of blaze of glory, like
Yeah,
Commodore Decker did.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I 1000% agree with you. If you're going to have your main hero of your franchise has to go out in a blaze of glory, doing a heroic act of selflessness and basically sacrificing for the good of the many. And I think that's the way you kind of would want somebody going out. They actually did that when they had a chance to do the Tasha Yar's second uh, death in the Next Generation in yesterday's Enterprise.
Hmm.
She knows she's going to die and kind of assumes this kind of heroic uh, death. So I think you're 100% right that that's what you're supposed to write for your not like you just fall off the bridge or some kind of boom and there's an accident or you get stabbed in the back and it's over really quickly. I thought they did that with Dax too. They killed Dax's character way too nonchalantly.
Mm-hmm.
There should be some level of heroism in there, and to some degree, the last time we saw Captain Cisco, it was under those kinds of circumstances where he was making this sacrifice for this greater good of the Dominion War and all of these other things that were at stake. So yes, that's the way you're supposed to close out on a hero's story.
Mm-hmm.
But back to this episode, this William Wyndham guy I thought did just a fantastic job. There was a disheveledness to him that I thought was great. He kind of had like a 5 o'clock shadow about on him that gave him a little bit of scruff. He kind of looked like he had been drinking a little bit, actually, from my.
Yeah, he did.
Just, if I had to guess, it looked like he was, drinking.
He was
And
on
he
a
had that
bender.
kind of, yeah, he looked like he had one of those kinds of deals. So, and to me, another thing that's great about this drama is, Leonard Nimoy really holding back what we all as the audience are feeling, which is screw you, who are you? This is not your ship. You don't come here and boss everybody around. That's what we as the audience are feeling, but Leonard Nimoy is withholding all of that and using his Vulcan mind of logic to kind of overcome that scenario by saying, is this man accurate in what he's describing? Because he was being lawful in his assuming command of the Enterprise. I believe that he was saying, I outrank you. I have the authority to do that. He even cited, whatever Starfleet
Mm-hmm.
regulation it was. And those are the things that, as a matter of making a legal argument to somebody, was convincing for Spock, even though it went against his better judgment because he knew that this wasn't the best thing for the ship. So I love that tension there. That to me is what makes for good drama.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did you notice also he was Commodore Decker, which is something that's rarely used in Star Trek. I don't know if this was the first time it was used or if it was used at some point in the first season, but it's very rare. Usually we have commanders, captains, admirals, and so on. Commodore apparently is right in between captain and admiral. So he does outrank Kirk as well. And just as an aside, again, very, very rarely used, very rarely. But Commander, or I should say Commodore Geordi LaForge got the rank of Commodore in Star Trek Picard Season 3. So I thought that was a really fun nod that he was not a captain or an admiral like everybody else. They gave him a special rank that is very rarely used, but really classy, I thought. But back to this. So another thing I wanted to mention was the comm badge. And Walter, you're probably used to this, but Sirach and I are not, that the USS Constellation had a different badge. And all of the ships back then had a different badge. And the insignia that we're used to was specific to the Enterprise with Kirk and Spock and Walter. It wasn't
I
until
wondered about
later.
that.
Yeah, it wasn't until later that they just kind of adopted like one type for everything and just went forward. But back in the original series era, every ship had their own comm badge, and this one was huge and like looked like a
It
pretzel.
was. I saw that. Yeah. Um, I'm glad you pointed that out because it did jump out to me. I was like, what the heck is that? I couldn't, they didn't explain it. So I just was left to my own imagination about what that meant. But I did notice that Commodore Decker had a different insignia on his lapel than the usual Starfleet uh, uh, insignia that we're used to seeing. So yeah, that did register with me as well. No explanation, but I did understand it.
Oh, here, real quick, check this out, just for a little more detail on that. Here it is. So
Yeah,
you see all the
there's the
different
constellation.
ones, and you see the constellations right here. Defiant. This is the one we recognize, of course. But yeah, all of these had been screen used back during the original series. Wow, the Beagle is nuts. What a mess. Anyway, really cool and interesting. And then they just kind of started to say, you know what, let's just keep it simple. But this is really cool otherwise. This one looks like a tree.
It looks like a domino.
Yeah. Anyway, you were saying?
No, the other thing I was going to say was Kirk also did a great job, in my opinion, in this episode as well. I like the scene in which he calls back to the Enterprise and asks to speak to Spock. And Spock's in the background, and Commodore Decker says, "Hey, I'm in charge. You're going to speak with me. I have something to say. You say it to me." And Kirk kept saying, "Yeah, okay, yeah. Put Spock on the phone."
Right.
It was great. And another moment that I love too, was finally when Commodore Decker decides, yes, I will let you speak to Spock. Spock looks like, well, where do you want me to take the call? And Decker does one of these moves, like you come over here and you talk on my console over here on my armchair,
so I can listen in.
Yeah, it was just great. It's great writing to me. Those little subtle moments, those exchanges, to me, that's great writing because that's what drama to me is about. It's about these kinds of moments where,
yeah, absolutely. This is what this episode was. This is why I said that it didn't need a genre to tell the story, because everybody can identify with the conflict, with the tension, the relationships, and what they meant to each other. That's what the story is about. It's not about space and shooting stars and things. And I certainly totally support that. I have one question. This is going to sound really stupid. I was surprised to see Kirk in that blouse. Is that something that he wore often?
In the green one, right? Rarely.
Yeah.
I think it was if I remember correctly, it was in his contract for the episodes that you were not in, because he knew you would criticize it. So he said, all the episodes that Walter's not in, I want to wear a green blouse, please. And so.
Oh, now that makes sense.
No, but yeah, he was in that. I don't remember how many, but not a bunch. I don't remember how many episodes, but not a bunch.
It feels like the second time this year. I feel like he was in that other episode with the Greek gods. I thought he was wearing it in that episode as well.
Really? It wasn't something like a formal blouse or something you wear on a special occasion or something?
The fact that you keep calling it a blouse is it's funny in it. It's funny in itself. It does have that bottom belt kind of wrap. It has like that bottom belt wrap that comes around the side. I think it's actually, and I'm speculating, I have no idea, but the reason why I would assume somebody would want to wear that as opposed to something else is to kind of for your weight and like cover up, like distract your eyes from, maybe if you're feeling a little hefty in this episode, you might want to take your eye line away from a gut. And so you put this strap around blouse that kind of throws your eyes away from it. That's my guess.
Well, and I wish I had the information on hand right now, but it just boils down to the color of what the uniforms were meant to be. And I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like he was originally intended to be wearing a lime green uniform. But then the way it was filmed or the way it was shot, it came out looking gold. And so they went back to that. There's something there that's actual, like practical, it was a practical situation, not a writer's room kind of situation, if that makes sense. And I can find the information within our second segment, I'm sure, because that's what the story is. I don't remember exactly the details, but it's something like that. It's something just with production, if I remember correctly.
Could it have something to do with trying to distinguish him from Decker?
No, although I did think that Decker's voice sounded a lot like Bones to me. When he spoke, I was like, is that DeForest? Like, it really sounded a lot like him, but without that twang, but very similar voice tone. Well, let's jump into our break real quick. We're going to squabble about uniforms, and then we'll be right back on the seventh rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to that there seventh rule with Sirach Lofton and Walter Koenig, two legends. It's time for the trivioids, everybody. Here they come, fast and furious. There's no sign of Commodore Matt Decker in the USS Constellation initially. There were no half-empty cups of coffee left on the USS Constellation. The Constellation's warp drive is a hopeless pile of junk. 400 people died on the third planet of System L370. Scotty just earned his pay for the week. I thought there was no pay in the future. I don't know. Vulcans never bluff. A starship commander is a valuable commodity. We get a Lieutenant Kyle sighting. I like Lieutenant Kyle. All right, everybody. Walter told us in the break that he has something very negative to say about this episode. So here it comes, a segment we call Salty Walty.
Yeah, well, I want to precede my comment with another comment. It's been really nice knowing you guys. I've had a really good time doing this. I'm sorry that we have to, this final note is going to just be such a jaundice, encompassing. Oh God, I don't know. The last moment of the episode, the very last moment, Kirk quips. It doesn't belong there. Not with what we've just gone through. A little giggle, not in this episode. It doesn't belong. I know that we've used that to good effect on many episodes, a little postscript, but not here. Not when we've had such a dynamic, tension-filled experience. I just felt that it was a moment that did not belong.
You're talking about the little jokey moment at the end of the episode, and then they play that they cue the music of the wah wah wah, the little like the little cute music, like everything's back to normal at the end, and it's all. I agree with you. You have an episode of this magnitude. You have a main guest star losing their life. You had the threat of everybody losing their life in this episode. I would have liked to see it end on a tone of moment of silence for Decker.
Yeah.
I think that would have been something that, I would have liked that. Just a moment, or even they could have even been raising a glass to toast to Decker, something to commemorate him, a moment of silence on the bridge for Commodore Decker and the sacrifices he made. Just something like that would have been a nice.
That would have been beautiful. That would have been perfect.
Mm-hmm. It would have been perfect. I 100% agree with you. Sometimes, and when I see that, it makes me think that that's the time period and the kind of shows that they were trying to make at the time period where it has this kind of, it all ends on a happy note. Let's get the audience back happy and chipper again. When it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be that. We don't watch Star Trek for the jokes. We watch it to be challenged with science and with problem solving and be challenged morally or ethically. This one had a real good ethical question about command, and if you don't have your crew supporting your leadership, are you truly going to be a good leader? And I think the answer in this episode was no. You could see that Spock was second guessing him. At some point, Sulu was second guessing his orders. People were starting to lose faith in Commodore Decker's ability to keep them alive and to be a captain who's has their best interest at heart. And so once you lose that, this episode explored, you know, how how meaningful that is, and also the courage that Spock has to step up and say, "Okay, that's enough is enough. I've given you enough. I honored your initial power request, the hierarchy that's in place under Starfleet Command. I honored that, but now I'm going to step in and take action. And if you have a complaint, there is a formal process for which you can file a complaint after I'm done. So I'm willing to take a court martial or whatever it's going to cost me to make this kind of override at this moment." So I think that was also one of the great power dynamics of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Yep.
We've got an update on the great debate of the green blouse. So basically what it was originally the uniforms, the gold uniforms, were like a light lime green or avocado green. It was just the velour fabric under that lighting, and with the original whatever thing it was shot on. I don't remember if that's Technicolor or what. I don't know, that kind of stuff. It came out on screen as gold. So what we saw as gold was actually like a greenish color when they shot it. Then he had this other tunic that he wore in this episode and a few other episodes. It was actually a very similar or the same color as all the other gold uniforms, but it was a different fabric that didn't reflect the light in the same way. So it actually did look green. So same color uniforms for gold and green, but one came out looking gold and one came out looking green is the answer to that weird question. And I hope I explained it well, because I don't know if I did. Anyway, so also the lady that replaced Nichelle was Lieutenant Palmer. I feel like she was in a few episodes as well, Lieutenant Palmer. It's always nice to see the people that come back for a few episodes, like Palmer, like Lieutenant Kyle. There was a guy in your place, Walter. I don't know if he gets a lot of work in subsequent episodes, but I did like one thing he and George did when they got hit by the ship. I don't know if you noticed, but he and George were in complete unison. You must have noticed, right? I watched it like 3 times. They went like this together and like that. It was like choreographed beautifully.
Wrong. That's exactly what I noticed. It was like that. When they hit, you go back and you look, and you'll see that they did not go together, at least in one sequence. They went, and how could they both be going in different directions and being hit by the same thing?
Well, in one, they were definitely together. Usually they go in different ways. And Commodore Decker, when the two of them, to your point, when the two of them are going like this in this one shot that I'm thinking of specifically, they're going like this. He's just leaning forward and hanging out. He's totally different than the rest of them.
Okay, that leads me to my last comment. Yeah, it wasn't this. I'm not talking about the scene with Kyle. I'm talking about the scene with the gentleman who played the navigator, the silent navigator. He and George went like this in one moment where there was a collision, and it bothered me that you have somebody so prominently on the screen who has not a bloody thing to say. I understand they were saving money because he was there as Bill. You remember his name? I mean, he did a lot of our shows, particularly when Chekhov wasn't around.
Was it Bill Blackburn? Yeah, I think it's Bill Blackburn.
Yeah, that's who it was.
Lieutenant Hadley.
Yeah, never had a word, never had a comment, never had anything. And I get it. I understand that they're saving money, but holy cow, if you're going to have him prominently in the picture, You got to
Mhm.
use him in some way other than just being a body. That was my feeling. He was just a body.
Absolutely, it's different than if you're in the background, but he's in the foreground in this
Yes,
particular moment.
yes.
So yeah, you would expect him to say, "Sir, Captain, something, anything, one word, a line, even one word would be enough to just make his presence felt." I 100% agree with that. You know, one thing I had a little bit of my nitpick was the fight scene that was choreographed between Decker and that one Montgomery officer that was supposed to walk him out. And those fight scenes, if they're going to be that long, they have to. It just didn't need to be that long for me. I think it could have been like a quick. He's coming out of the elevator, boom, chops him on the shoulder,
Yeah.
and then it's over. The whole like back and forth fighting these two guys, and then a random storage closet door opens up and he drags them into it. Like, that to me, it's like it's a little bit hard for me.
That
I'm
was
thinking,
fun
well,
though.
what is that the mop closet on the like,
Well,
is that
what
the
was weird?
janitor's room that he
What was
dragged him
weird to me
into? Because it
about
looked
that
like
guy
nobody's going in there.
is that
Yeah,
guy's name was Montgomery, right? I'm like, you have a
yeah,
Montgomery Scott, and now you have a Lieutenant Montgomery. Like,
right.
you don't need to pay homage to a guy that's literally on. I mean, maybe if Next Generation or
Right.
Voyager had a Lieutenant Montgomery, we'd say, oh, that's really cute and sweet. But you don't have to have a Lieutenant Montgomery on the same set as a Montgomery Scott. Like, we don't have to. I don't know. Maybe I was looking
Yeah.
into it too
That's a
deeply.
mistake. That's just a mistake. Somebody should have caught that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you, Walter, a little bit about this theme that ends up becoming a theme recurring in Star Trek throughout all of the franchises. And this is one of the first times we see this kind of a theme. And the theme that I'm talking about, they call it the planet killer, which is basically this mass annihilation weapon. And in this episode, they referred to the H bomb,
Yeah.
the hydrogen bomb, which was, something that had scared the public into, these kinds of machinations in their head about total destruction, right? And I believe that this begins a common theme of a destructive force, device, whatever you want to call it, that is able to eradicate planets and solar systems and things of that nature. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about the time period coming out of uh, the atomic age and the hydrogen bombs, and what was the climate like in that time about these kinds of destructive weapons.
Well, I think you said it all already. I think what was transpiring, what we were dealing with the hydrogen bomb and mass annihilation, inspired the story that the writer, appropriated what was happening in the world and included it in his story. I don't think there's any question about that. And you hit it on the head. I really don't have anything more to say. I'm sure that at the time we understood that. I don't know if we talked about it, but I'm sure that we knew what the source was for this mass annihilation theme.
Yeah, we see that again pop up. Ryan with the progenitors and their kind of extinction level event creation device that they have that's able to destroy life at such a rate. We've seen it with the burn in Discovery with some this kind of mass extinction type of event. And so yeah, this threat is a common theme. I like to see how they originate, and obviously watching. And this is another thing I wanted to ask you, Walter. How do you feel? Because it's funny that when I hear this every time. especially when I write it in my notes. I write down in my notes. I write down the name of the show before I do my notes.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this case, this would be my notes here, and here I write down the Star Trek, the original series. That's the headline of this. And I wondered what you felt about the original series designation being added after the fact,
Me
because
too.
you guys were Star Trek, right? And at some point it became the original series. And I was, I know it's a stupid question, but I always wondered how you felt about that designation, because it always feels weird to me when I write it. I'm like, the original series.
Yep. Just to add to that, I feel the same way every time I speak it out. I want to say today we're doing a review of Star Trek, the Doomsday Machine, but part of me says, no, I have to say the original series. Otherwise, you know what I mean? Like it's confusing to some people, in some way. But now we have to add that, just like Star Wars was Star Wars. Now we have to call it A New Hope. But anyway, what do you think, Walter?
Well, when they first started using that, I was institutionalized for over a month in a sanitary. What?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't bother me, guys. It does
You
not
were acting
bother
like
me
Commodore
at all.
Decker for a
I
month.
think it gives us
Yeah.
a distinction. It's kind of distinctive. If anything, it feels like a bit of flattery. I don't know. So it never bothered me.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
it
just
doesn't
us then,
bother me
Sarat.
either. It doesn't bother me. It just makes me actually. It makes me think of when was the distinction made. I think that's probably
Mhm.
the biggest question in my mind is at what point, because wasn't the next generation. At what point did they say, you know what, we've got to call this thing the original series or something to that effect too, because there's so much Star Trek out there floating around. So I wondered when that exactly happened, but nonetheless, the other thing that kind of jumped out at me was Spock's pronunciation of sensors.
Yes. Okay.
Sensors.
How fun is this? So he started saying sensors, right? This is another thing. Okay. Let's put away the H bomb and the thing of mass destruction. Star Trek also started saying the word sensors. And after that, every actor that has played a Vulcan in subsequent series calls them sensors, whether it's Tim Russ doing Tuvok, or whether it's Jolene Blaylock being T'Pol in Enterprise. Every Vulcan says sensors. And it's just because
That's
I guess it was
cool.
just a choice by Leonard, right?
What's the distinction?
Sensors.
Sensors. Okay.
Walter's like, this is what, but it's a real thing in Star Trek lore that Vulcans call them sensors because of this exact pronunciation. Did he confide in you, Walter? Did Leonard come to you and say, I really think that being a Vulcan, I should say one word differently to distinguish Vulcans from humans? And then you were probably thinking, Nichelle, why don't you let's think. And then you and Nichelle kind of said, what about sensors? Oh, that'd be fun. Try sensors. Or was there anything like that?
Well, I think the original choice was folk instead of fuck.
Are you out of your Vulcan mind? Is that what we're
I
talking
know
about?
you're going to cut that out.
Very good.
No, I have no nothing to contribute in the area of this discussion.
I think we contributed enough. I think, but it is a true thing that since then, that's just an interesting part of Star Trek lore. Do you guys know? Maybe I missed it. I was curious the whole time. What were those two green and yellow cards that Commodore Decker was playing with? He's holding those two things. Were they like chips from his ship, or what were those things? Discs? Did they explain that?
I thought it was two pieces of cheese. I thought he was having a snack.
Okay, I guess they didn't explain it. So we still
I
have.
wondered the same. I wondered the same thing. I
Yeah,
saw
I
him.
thought I missed it.
Oh,
Just
they didn't say anything. Might have been on another scene that was cut out of this episode,
Okay. Then the other
but
thing
I
I
didn't
wanted
see
to
anything.
comment on, because we only have a few minutes left, was the lighting on Shatner's face. He has great lighting. He receives great lighting. Also, there's the old school way, back in the days of having like the face kind of darkly lit, but then that strip of light here. They loved to do that. Usually they would do it to the ladies, but they did it with Kirk a lot, especially in this episode, that strip of light. But overall, he had great lighting. And then I would watch the rest of the episode, and everybody else had different lighting. They just kind of had regular lighting. And it made me wonder, Walter, do you remember any conversations where Bill Shatner would be involved in lighting, saying, hey, I need better lighting, or specifically something like that? Because I noticed he specifically had different lighting than the rest of the crew, and his lighting was really good. So I don't know, was that something that you think was coming from Bill, or just that they wanted their lead, the star, to have this certain look?
I don't know. And to comment on that could be perceived as being spiteful. And so I'm just assuming they knew he was the principal actor. The director knew, the producer knew, the cinematographer knew, and that you just naturally make sure that you're showing that actor in the best possible lighting, for want of a better word. So I don't know any inside information about that.
Okay, just something I noticed.
I certainly didn't. I didn't take offense at it. And I think it was proper.
Well,
My speculation, though, on that is that, if I'm not mistaken, this was in 1967. So, how prominent were color TVs at that time, Walter? Was it a common thing, or what was the ratio, would you say, of television sets from black and white to color?
Was just at the turning point, as far as I remember. It was just when color became really, really dominant. That's what I think. We started out watching Star Trek at home in black and white, and
Right.
that I think in the second season, the third season, we got a color set.
Yeah, because some of the lighting for me, Ryan, feels like the black and white lighting, especially with the shadows across the face. It reminds me of
Yeah.
that Casablanca type of shadows that come across the face. And so it's possible that a lot of the people working on the lighting were also people that had done black and white prior to that and lit for that kind of filming. It just feels like.
Okay, so before we close the book on this episode, I just got to point out that this is one of the most popular episodes of Star Trek, the original series. And I've heard people talk about it so many times. I've heard of Commodore Decker. I've heard of the Constellation. I've heard of the Doomsday machine. I've heard of the giant doobie flying through space. And they totally fixed up the VFX for it, by the way. They changed it up, and it was evident throughout the episode how much better the VFX was, really modernized it. I remember my yoga teacher 15 years ago was always like, dude, you got to watch the Doomsday Machine. It's so good. I was like, oh, I'll watch it some other time. My friend Stan, shout out to Stan, always like, he would use the word Ma, and I was like, what's Ma, M-A-W? And then he would quote this episode where they said a maw that could swallow several ships or whatever it is. So big episode. Glad we finally got to see it. Walter, if I were to say Jerry Coleman, who's that? Oh, we just lose Walter.
Walter's like, there's your answer.
All right. Well, while we wait for Walter to hop back on, the answer was, of course, he was a member of the 1950s Yankees. And I'll bet you Walter would know this with his Yankees hat. which would lead us into the home run of the day. Sirach Lofton, who gets the home run of the day?
Oh, yeah. I'm glad Walter gave us his name. William Wyndham gets the home run of the day for me. Loved him as the guest star. Like I said, he kind of was that, you know, there were likable things about him, and there were also dislikable things about him. But he definitely looked disheveled and very disturbed. So I thought that was a great portrayal of somebody who had witnessed something dramatic and was dealing with that stress. So I would give it to the guest star of this episode. And I also want to give an honorary mention to Norman Spinrad, because I thought it was a well written episode as well. The pacing, the timing, the dialogue, it all flowed well to me.
Yeah, I'm going with Mr. Spinrad myself. Solid episode. As Walter mentioned, it could have been an episode of Taxi or of, NYPD Blue. I don't know, any show, really, any genre. It was tight. It was clean. It had a story that we could follow. Good, solid episode all around. And good, solid people all around are, say it with me, Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman, Tom T.J. Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Titus Moeller, our pal, Dr. Mohammed Noor, Tierney C. Diekman, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, Dr. Stephanie Baker. Congratulations to them, by the way.
Yeah.
Harry Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett. Oh, that's cool. Henry Unger, Allison Leach High, Julie Manisfee, Jed Thompson. Here comes Walter. Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Tim Baum, Chris Sternett, Luther Haynes, and of course, oh man, Jason Oken and Greg K. Wickstrom out in Hawaii. All right, so here comes Walter. We're going to get the home run of the day from him.
And this is Mike Gu and Stephanie Baker here. This is something that I retrieved from their wedding celebration. It's a nice little magnet.
In a Voyager outfit right there. That's a Voyager cosplay right there. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, I guess we'll hop over to the other side on the free-for-all, and Walter will join us then. And then he'll tell us the home run of the episode for sure, I'll bet you. We'll see you soon on the Seventh Rule. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Seventh Rule. This is the free-for-all. All right. First things first. Walter, what do you think of if I say the name Jerry Coleman?
Jerry Coleman?
Or Billy Johnson or Cliff Mapes?
I don't know what you're talking about.
All right. Joe Collins, Hank Bauer, Yogi Berra. Anyway, these are Yankees from 1950 because we owe
Jerry Coleman. Oh, second baseman for the New York Yankees. Yeah.
See, I knew
and who were the
others. The point is, it's time for the home run of the day. Who do you think gets the home run of today's episode?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that because I thought we were going to miss that because the whole thing went peculiar on me. I was looking at a screen without anything that I could identify. For me, it's interesting. I would give it to two people. I would give it to Norman Spinrad, the writer, and I'd give it to Mark Daniels, the director. Mark and I had not a cold relationship, but and neither was it warm. It was just I was there, he was there. He infrequently spoke to me, but I never felt there was any hostility. But I thought the way he took the material, he really did a good job of bringing it to life the way it was written. The tension, the conflict, the surprises, the personalities, and Spock and William Wyndham's character. I thought it was really, really well done. And I said it was not a script that required a science fiction framework. It was a script that could have been done with minor changes on a totally non-genre level. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I thought it was so well accomplished that I would give it to both of them.
Very good. Good stuff. And now on to the free-for-all with Melissa Longo.
Hi.
Jason M. Oken. Got Faith Howell, of course. Carrie Schwent with a big doobie behind her. Allison Leach Hyde is here as well. And the Dark Lord, Chris McGee, batting cleanup. All right. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
You know, I'm going to say this episode was a 9.1. A 9.1.
Big time. Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know by now?
Well, I don't know.
Say an 8.7, maybe.
I would concur with my my fellow
podcaster.
Yeah, 9.1 sounds good to me.
Dark Lord says 8.7. Anybody else? The answer, of course, Melissa's smiling because she knows that somebody hit it right on the head, and it is Chris McGee, 8.7. Excellent work.
Way.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Way.
2 times in a row.
Oh, that's right.
Pretty good.
What the heck?
I swear I'm not looking them up. I swear.
All right. Any non-appearance mentions? I don't think so. No mention of Uhura or Chekhov or anybody like that, right? All right. Well, there was a mention of one lieutenant in Decker's ship, but I don't think we ever see that guy. I think it was just a random mention. All right. Melissa Longo, please get us started off on the right track by telling us what you thought of this episode.
I thought this episode was great. I really enjoyed this episode. And the mark of a good episode for me is always if I talk to the television. And I definitely talked to the television while I was watching this. There are so many great things about this episode. I was really impressed by William Wyndham, who played the Commodore. I read somewhere that he wasn't so happy with his performance, and he felt he was overacting, but I didn't get that. And so if that was if that was what he got, I got something totally different. I got somebody who is actually going through the grief of losing his shipmates and all of the people under his command. I got somebody who was experiencing survivor's guilt. And that played very, very well. And the thing I love about these TOS episodes is that they're so innovative and creative. And people talk about, their TOS isn't as high tech or any of this, but the tech that they do have is pretty great for what they had at the time, for what they had to work with at the time. And I love that because it sparks creativity. They have to get creative with the story that they're telling and how they're going to make you feel like you're in outer space. And I feel that when I watch these episodes. So I thought it was really, really great.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff. Thanks very much, Melissa Longo, out in LA. Jason M. Oken is also here. What's up, Jason? I'm guessing you've seen this episode before, right?
Once or twice before. it is, it certainly, makes the top sort of favorite lists of Star Trek episodes for a reason. It's a wonderful episode. It has everything. And if you consider that this was intended to be and was a bottle show, to have that much sort of tension, that much energy, and it's a beautiful looking episode, as Walter said. I mean, Mark Daniels, I think, did a wonderful job here, and I certainly wouldn't dismiss Jerry Finnerman's lighting here. It probably is one of the best looking next season 2 episodes of the original series, and maybe for the entire run. If you look at the shadows and and the lighting and sort of the slash on the eyes of mostly Bill Shatner, if you look at the way he shot Shatner on the bridge of the Enterprise, it's always from below, sort of in this hero pose. Almost every shot is like that, which is certainly sort of puts him up on the pedestal. And the fact that he's wearing a different uniform, specifically, so he stands out even more from the rest of the cast. It certainly sort of played him up quite a bit, and the musical score by Sol Kaplan shouldn't be overlooked. If you hear something that sounds somewhat like Jaws, it may not be by accident, because the Jaws theme sounds very, very similar to this, and the sound is iconic, the look's iconic. There's certainly a lot more here, but again, when you have good writing, good directing, good acting, with a good, you just get something that you can sit there and watch over and over again. So this one is definitely among the best.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Jason. A lot of mention of music and lighting for this episode, with good reason. Faith Howell is here. She knows what we mean when we're talking about good lighting and good music. What do you think of this episode?
Definitely, this is a very memorable episode. I think that the Doomsday Machine is iconic Star Trek. It's definitely something that I think has appeared in some of the animated series and things that just comes to mind when you think of TOS. I really think this episode in particular sort of ticks all the boxes. It has that heartfelt, you're heartbroken for the loss of all hands for the other ship, and you're understanding why Matt Decker acts the way he does, even though he's, of course, the villain sort of this dynamic. There's the suspense of, our captain is in danger and he's not there when we need him the most. And are we going to get him back? And they make you hold that breath until the very last second. So, I think this is a just all around great episode, fun to watch. As you guys have said, the music's great. And I definitely agree with Melissa. I don't think Matt Decker was overacted at all. I think it fits very well within the genre. Maybe, in the wider scheme at the time, it may have felt that way, but I think for Trek, it's right on key. So all around great episode.
Thanks so much, Faith.
Oh, you got this, Melissa.
We haven't heard from Allison Lee Tide. Hello, welcome. And what did you think of this episode?
As I've gotten older, like it more and more. As a kid, I'm like, I don't know, like what's going on. But as I got older, and I'm like, okay, this is definitely Moby Dick, and we're going over the dangers of nuclear weapons. I'm like, okay, I get that now as an adult. As a kid, I was just like, I don't get this, but that's okay. This wasn't for kids. This was for adults. So I thought everyone did a great job. The lighting is my favorite in this episode because it really helps bring up the tension, what our characters are experiencing. And so I thought that was really well done. I love that the actor who played Decker is futzing with the things all the time. And he got it from... let's see, who did he get? Never mind, doesn't matter. But I loved that because it showed how he was just so shooken up from what he had been through. So I did think that was a great touch that he did. And there was one thing that I thought was really interesting about how things change between countries. I know I've brought this up before, but so there's a line that Kirk says in this episode, walking past a female crew member, and says, every solar system in this sector blasted to rubble. That is not what he said in the German version. In the German version, he was dubbed as saying, I think I should work on getting these skirts longer again. So they completely changed that. And I don't know why. I can only guess that had to do with German standards of television at the time. But I thought that was really, really interesting. So I can't really bring anything new to the table about how this episode is actually really, really good. But I liked that little bit of how we change things between different countries to make it fit their standards. So like the episode and understand why it's usually in like the top 10 to 20 episodes of Star Trek lists all the time.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Allison Leach Hyde, out in Southwest USA, somewhere in the desert. We've got Carrie Schwent here, aka Crafty Bear. What's up, Carrie? What'd you think of this one?
I very much liked it. I liked it even better when I was fully conscious the second time watching it, because I watched it the first time at the end of a very long day. So I was very tired, and I kept finding myself nodding off. But once I was more fully conscious and watching again and able to pay more attention, I very much enjoyed it. The transporter pad, when it was doing its little puffs of smoke, the first one, I jumped like probably half an inch. And the Doomsday machine behind me, the first thing I thought of when I saw it, and I'll cover my camera so you can see it better, is the spacecraft from Dune. It's really reminds me of the spacecraft that you see in both of the newer Dune movies. And Allison, I've got your back on what William was modeling the fidgeting after, which for the record I do myself. I've been fiddling with this like the whole time, and I usually do. But he was modeling it after Humphrey Bogart in a movie called The Kane Mutiny. And I guess he was in that movie, Bogart's fiddling with like ball bearings or something. And Wyndham has said, like years later, he didn't realize the Moby Dick allegories of the episode until many years later when he read it in an article that was talking about it. And he's like, oh yeah, if I'd have realized that, I might have played the character a little bit differently, because he admitted that he played it a little cartoonish. And yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I totally get the whole fidgeting thing. And apparently the reason Nichelle Nichols is not in the episode is she had a scheduling conflict and she had a singing engagement somewhere in New York. Otherwise, I guess she would have been in the episode. And yeah, I found a whole bunch of stuff on Memory Alpha. And the crewman that stays behind on the Constellation with Kirk, I forgot to write down his name, but he would eventually go on and direct the season 1 TNG episode Angel 1. And I thought that was absolutely very cool.
Cool.
I've got a couple others that I'll save for things left unsaid, but I'll finish up with a fun, if slightly morbid haiku that I came up with for the episode, because that's how my brain works. A giant space worm creates, then eats debris. Commodore is dessert.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. Yeah. Like behind Melissa, she's got like a cannoli. It's like a Doomsday Machine cannoli behind her. Pretty cool. All right. Chris McGee is also here. Chris, what did you think of this episode? You've seen it before for sure.
Once or twice. The Doomsday Machine. Well, it's one of my favorite. Actually, I would say it's my absolute favorite original series episode. Not because of the iconic planet killer or that memorable tension-building music or the fact that it is arguably one of the best episodes of Star Trek, although those certainly help it. No, it's my favorite because I think it was the very first Star Trek episode I ever saw of any series. And frankly, that's one I'd love to see followed up. Oh, I know there are some non-canonical follow-ups, like an episode of Star Trek New Voyages, or even a novel set during the Next Generation era that includes the Borg. But I'd love to see an official production as a follow-up. I mean, for examples, as Spock alluded to at the end, perhaps we could discover an entire fleet of these planet killer machines, or maybe we discover something terrifying while examining the husk of this dead one. There are many possibilities to continue this story that I'd love to see one day. On the cinematography side of things, I liked that unusual shot near the beginning of the episode of Kirk walking around the bridge and in front of the view screen. I mean, we've seen the character do this many, many times, but only from like the viewpoint of the front of the bridge. This is the first time I can remember where the camera's placed in the middle of the bridge, tracking him as he walks around. And I'll also like that it's bookended with another walk around the bridge at the end of the episode, this time with Spock. Oh, and before I ever saw this episode, the only Commodore I knew of was the Commodore 64.
Hey.
Memorable quote of the episode. I got to go with Spock as usual. Random chance seems to have operated in our favor.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Chris McGee. The only Commodore I knew was Lionel Richie. All right, good stuff there. Jake's final take, everybody. Sirach, final thoughts on this episode?
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted. We caught him while he was eating. Sorry.
No, there's some lines that I enjoyed. One of them is one of the classics for Bones, and when he says, "I'm a doctor, not a mechanic." You know, I like hearing those lines because I know that he's the originator of those kinds of phrases. So every time he drops one, it makes me kind of warm inside to hear. So that jumped out to me. The other thing that jumped out to me was Montgomery Scott calling everybody lad. I don't know, lad. Oh, come here, lad. Go over there, lad. I'm like, if this guy calls me lad, you know, I would be pissed about it. Like, I'm 32 years old, you know, or whatever, however the guy is. You know what I mean?
I'm your superior officer, bro.
Yeah. He just drops the lad bombs whenever he wants, and it's funny to me. He also had a great line when he says it's hard to keep it from blowing when he asked him to blow the ship up. I love that response that he gave. I don't know. I felt like there's more power that Bones has as a doctor to essentially make Commodore Decker have to submit to a psychological evaluation. And I felt like there could have been a force there, like some kind of, you know, pulling of rank. Like, no, I'm the medical officer. If I don't clear you, then you can't be in charge of this ship. I thought he could have technically pulled that kind of rank because we've seen Dr. Crusher do that to other people in subsequent episodes. So he kind of gave up, and he was really upset about Commodore Decker, you know, taking power, but it felt like he could have challenged him with his own legal authority by Starfleet Code section, this, whatever. There should have been a little bit more pushback in that department, in my opinion. And then another common theme that we see a lot in Star Trek that I just, you know, since this is the original series and this is where it kind of all of it emanates from, transporter malfunction, common theme. This is one of the original transporter malfunction moments. And also communication loss, not being able to, you know, static, the core field, we don't have any communication with the away team. So I know they become common to us after some point when you hear these themes, but these are the origins of those ideas, right? Like transporter malfunction origin comes in this around this time. So I just think it's good to highlight that they give us so much to work with in these on this early series that ends up becoming a really big integral part of the Star Trek canon going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Yeah.
Walter, what about yourself? Any final thoughts on this episode?
Well, I was very touched by if only Chekhov was here to save the day. What?
We all thought the same. Yeah. Please continue.
Yeah. I'm glad. All right. I have nothing more to say. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Great episode.
Yeah, we lost your mic for a second, but we got you saying you thoroughly enjoyed it. Great episode, right? Excellent. All right.
Yes.
Also, a couple quick items. Walter, you know the Hubble telescope, right? We've actually been kind of seeing some things. Here's a nice shot of what the Hubble telescope saw, like a nebula, but of course, when you zoom in a little bit, you kind of magnify, you clear it. Oh boy. Oh, that's a problem. We're in trouble now. And also, Chris McGee got some kinds of, or some sorts of. What do you got, Chris?
Well, the first one was Kirk saying, Scotty, could some kind of general energy dampening field do that? And then Spock later on, when contemplating how the machine is fueled, he says, sensors indicate some kind of total conversion drive.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right. Yeah. That's it for us, everybody. If you are a patron of this show, stay tuned for Things Left Unsaid. Just hop over to the other side, click that other video, and jump in there. Those of you that are not, hey, it was great having you anyway. Thank you to Chris, Allison, Carrie, Faith, Jason, and Melissa. And for myself, Sirach, Walter, Melissa, and Mr. Aaron Eisberg, we'd like to thank you all for hanging out with us. And until next time, always remember the 7th rule.